I've been an orphan all my life, or at least until I was old enough to understand what that meant. My caretaker told me she found me crying on the orphanage's doorstep with my baby clothes as my only belongings. No other soul was in the vicinity. With that, I grew up as a somewhat quiet and distant child, in which most adoptees find unappealing. Well, could you blame me? It was hard to live a life knowing the moment you were born, you were unwanted. Trust has constantly been something tough for me to give. Well, at least except for my caretaker. Although no one adopted me, she made sure I had a good childhood, graduate and land a job to start a life outside the orphanage. She always has been my role model. She was amazing even though she only did this part-time. Her last moments were the saddest experiences. To honor her memory, I took the mission to continue her work. The mission to make sure every orphan gets to live the life I have, regardless if they get adopted. It wasn't easy, but I know from the child's smiles I'm doing something right. I'm happy to say, most under my care got adopted in a few months, all except one. A boy named Kevin. He's a peculiar case. It was a rainy night when Kevin arrived at the orphanage. I remember I was watching a horror movie with the kids when someone knocked on the front door around midnight. That knock startled everyone, which led to a party of laughter. On the other side was a 4-year-old wet and crying, somehow wearing seemingly expensive clothes. As I got the chance to inspect it further, his coat and pants were made of cashmere, and looking at the stitches, you'll know it's of high quality. I never truly got any information of Kevin's origin. No records on hospitals, no missing child reports from the police, nothing. All I know was our first interaction in which he said, "My mom left me. Can I stay here? I have nowhere else to go." I never got him to talk about anything about his past. I was careful of the possibilities of trauma, so I made sure I watched out for my words. I tried asking about his parents and where he originally lived, but all his replies to these personal questions were silence or shifting of the subject. I haven't gotten word from the police for months now either. Many questions lingered in my mind, but I shrugged them off. Kevin's welfare was a priority. In the first few weeks, Kevin was silent. Given this, I halt his endorsement for adoption, since he might not be ready to partake in a big change yet. But eventually, there were improvements. He started to laugh, sing and dance, and especially draw. He always loved to brag about how better of a drawer he is than me. He liked to eat velvet cake, in which I always cracked a smile whenever he savored the flavor by raising his chin and closing his eyes. His grades were amazing. He's a prodigy. I gave him the best recommendation possible for the adoptees to review. But whenever adoptees interact with him, something goes wrong. I don't know what to make out of what's happening. Kevin's credentials impressed prospects. It even attracted a lot of wealthy families. It was not a surprise. But at the moment they got to interact with Kevin, they suddenly turned sour, somewhat bitter, and quickly leave the premise as if they got offended. Kevin did nothing. I was always there as a witness when the prospects interact with the child. They asked him normal, typical questions like, "How are yous?" etc. And Kevin replied with a smile to all of them. But as they proceeded, they suddenly shifted moods, from interested to disgust. And I never got to wrap my head around why that was happening. It was over 65 prospects now, and not one liked him, except the next one. An old man wearing a full suit with a top hat and monocle entered the orphanage, asking me to summon Kevin. He described him as the peculiar but smart, dark-haired boy with a good English accent. Only one boy fitted that description. According to him, he got the word from several sources he can find that child here. I welcomed the man, and naturally, I started a conversation as we walked towards where Kevin is. May I know why you are adopting, Sir Reginald, was it? Yes, I've been looking for children to adopt to join me in my mansion. I never got married nor had children, but as you can see, I'm getting old. I need an heir, but it shouldn't be just any child. And Kevin, I believe, fits the description of whom I seek. I've been looking for a year now. My eyes bulged and heart fluttered in excitement. This is a huge opportunity for Kevin. May I know what you do, sir? Oh, I'm an investor. I inherited my fortune from a long lineage of ancestors. You could say I use my wealth to gain more wealth. It's quite a life, ain't it, young man? He laughed with a few wheezes and coughs. He grabbed a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his nose. He seemed to be out of breath. I could only imagine what his condition is from his old age. I gave several more discreet background check questions. He seemed to be a nice guy. I hoped he would like Kevin. After a few more steps, we reached him. He was drawing something before we interrupted him. As he noticed us, he quickly hid his drawing by closing his sketchbook and greeted us with a smile. I introduced him to his prospect adoptee, and somewhat expectant that this encounter won't end well with the past interviews in mind. But I had a good feeling this time. Hopefully the years of rejection for him was just to lead him to this moment. I got excited. They hit it off with typical questions as always. Kevin answered them perfectly with a smile. I could see that Reginald got engaged with the child. I'm glad they are hitting it off. It felt like I was Cupid, but for parents looking for a child. I hoped I aimed my arrows right. As experience dictated, it should be right about now that the prospects suddenly shift their preferences. But something else happened. Kevin looked shocked, judging from his defensive stature and widened eyes. Reginald continued to smile and stood firm in front of him, not fazed. Then Kevin faced me with a look I never saw from him before. I could feel him signaling discomfort, but looking that this is the first time a prospect did not run away, I shrugged the thought. Kevin needs to leave his comfort zone, and I know for a fact he's ready. It's been 2 years now. I've been waiting for this moment. After their brief interaction, Reginald expressed his interest to adopt Kevin. Finally, with sheer enthusiasm, I gave Reginald the next steps for this to happen. He told me he will send in a representative to process all this and to fetch Kevin. I have no qualms about it. What's important is that Kevin will get to have a new home. Hopefully, the process turns to a positive outcome. It was a long day and quite a surprising one. I wanted to treat Kevin out to dinner, especially since he will now get adopted. He was the longest child I had taken care of. I knew in my heart I have an attachment, but I know he'll get a better life on the road that lies ahead for him. But as we drove to the shop that serves his favorite red velvet cake, I noticed he looked depressed. I know for a fact this is normal. Most of them are just afraid, so I just wanted to make sure he'll have the courage to face his future. Hey, buddy, are you okay? Aren't you excited you will go to a mansion next week? Kevin shifted his vision at the side window. He remained quiet for a while before he finally spoke. I don't want him to be my parent, sir. I know Mom will come to get me someday. Can we please wait for her? It was the first time Kevin shared his inner thoughts. I gulped. Uneasiness filled my body instantly. I'm not sure how to reply. I never bothered searching for my parents, but I kind of get why he would cling to that hope. I didn't want to sound bitter, but I laid out the truth in the best way I could give it. Kevin, I know you miss your mother, but you also need to learn how to move on. You have someone who's willing to give you a better life than what you have in the orphanage. Don't you want that? No, I want my mother. I don't want that man. I don't want to live with him, Kevin stuttered as he sniffled. I immediately parked the car at the nearest legal spot. I quickly gave Kevin a hug. I felt his tears drop down the back of my neck. He twitched as he attempted to catch his breath. I patted his back to aid in his recovery. As he calmed down, I gave Kevin's shoulders a firm hold with both of my hands and looked him in the eyes. Kevin, you'll be okay, I promise. I will always be here. I will always protect you. I know it's scary that the one taking you is not your mother, but be strong. You want to be the best artist in the world, right? I'm sure Sir Reginald will enable that future for you, and he will be the best. Kevin nodded as he wiped off his tears. Do you promise you'll protect me? He said as he raised his dominant hand with his pinky finger laid out. It was the cutest thing. I held his hand instead with both of my hands. Before I replied, I promise. In that moment, a heat surged in Kevin's hand that made me pull away. I checked my affected right hand expecting a burn of some sort, but nothing appeared. It might have just been my imagination. I shrugged. All that mattered that night was Kevin's acceptance of what lies ahead. We had the best dinner that night, but ever since that, I've been seeing things I never saw before. I first realized it at work. Some coworkers have these lingering black smoke. It was easy to miss. These smokes sometimes disappear, some were thick, some were thin. I kept on rubbing my eyes, not believing what I'm seeing. Not everyone has one. I don't have one, as I verified looking at the mirror. Not to mention, our CEO has several thick and black smokes circling around him. Circling him as if he was a bonfire for an Indian ritual, which made it hard to focus at his company-wide presentation. It's almost a week now and I couldn't take it anymore. I took a half day, and I gave myself an appointment to an eye doctor. And he saw nothing wrong with my vision. He suggested taking it easy. It might just be stress. Today was Kevin's last day at the orphanage, after a week-long process. I wanted to see him off. I took a day off to arrive early. The representative won't arrive for a few hours, so I had the chance to mingle with Kevin. My eyes bulged to notice he also has that lingering smoke. But his was white, unlike what I saw with the others. It encircles him, as if it's protecting him. Wanting a normal day, I ignored it as always. I really need a vacation. We got to play one last time. I also helped him pack up his things, seeing he didn't finish yet. After everything, he sat down with me, in which he gave me his notebook full of sketches. He said, "Don't open it right now. Open it when he leaves, so I will miss him." I shuffled his hair, teasing him. He was being cheesy. I will definitely miss this child. A doorbell rang. A woman wearing a maid outfit emerged on the other side, greeting Kevin before requesting him to alight at the limo she came from. Kevin gave me a hug before going. I felt a tear stream down from my left eye as he gets further away, but I noticed something as he went with the lady. The white smoke from before became erratic, pointing some kind of animosity towards the maid. I raised a brow, not knowing how to react. They eventually left. Kevin gave another wave from the backseat mirror. It was a cheerful goodbye, until I realized, going back inside the orphanage, the black smoke remained. It traversed the room erratically, as if it was desperately searching for something. It paused. I felt like it was staring at me. It then charged towards me. I ran in reaction, only to tumble to the orphanage's wooden floors after a few seconds. Luckily, no splinters pierced me. I found myself on the floor, lying on my back with the smoke an inch away from my face. Having a closer look, a face slowly formed. It was a woman. I stared at her frozen, trying to remember if I knew her, but no memory sparked. After a brief pause of staring at me, it disappeared. My mind went blank. The gears of my brain did not crank, as if a massive flood ruined it. I overcame my paralysis after a few seconds. As I recovered, I noticed the notebook fell out of my hands and was now open. I picked up only to see a good sketch of Sir Reginald, but with a black figure with two horns overlooking from his shoulders, as he smiled. Hooked, I checked out the other drawings. I never knew Kevin was this good. He shied away into showing me his work every time, so I did not have a gauge on his capabilities. I didn't want to break his trust, so I made sure not to take a peek. Kevin filled this notebook with drawings of their first encounter. There was a drawing of me and Reginald walking the halls with the same figure walking beside us. The figure in this drawing looked as if it was observing me. The notebook contained several picture-perfect sketches, as well with the same figure in different places. The most concerning one was the whole-body sketch of Reginald as he entered Kevin's room. Several familiar black smoke lingered around him. Some had obscure faces of children. Some showed limbs clawed to Reginald. One figure gave a familiar face and stature, but I had to verify it. I took over an hour to scour the orphanage's records of the year when I was 6 years old. That small little boy in the sketch was definitely one of the children here. I distinctly remember being jealous of him, that a wealthy man adopted that kid because he was the smartest. I gave a quick victory shout as I saw the paper. His name was Gerald. Someone named G.E. Aldrin adopted him. Memories flashed before me. I remember that guy, wore a top hat with a monocle. I'm sure I made fun of him in my head, as he looked like the old man in the Monopoly board game. In my recalling, Kevin popped in my mind. Impossible. My mind went into overdrive as I tried to compare the man from my memory to Kevin's drawing. It was definitely the same man. According to this record, he was 85 years old. It's been 20 years since. Although he was old, he didn't strike me as someone over 100, not to mention his documents showed he was 60. So what happened to Gerald? I wanted to believe this was all in my imagination, but an uncomfortable feeling in my gut gave danger signals all over my body. Kevin might be in trouble. As I came to believe that, a pain surged on my face. Someone punched me right in the face, and I reached out to my cheeks, caressing it, and it felt tender. I dashed towards the nearest mirror, only to see that I have a scrape on my cheeks. In that moment, another blow made its way through, this time towards the stomach. I tumbled to the ground in reaction, curled hoping to ease the pain. I closed my eyes as more blows hit my gut. After the pain stopped, danger seeped into my skin. The smoke from before appeared before me. This time formed a whole lady pointing her finger somewhere. As I stood up, I found out she pointed at my car keys. Instinct made me dash to the car. As I strode, I inspected my stomach, expectant of swellings, only to see it unscathed. What just happened? I drove madly in the middle of the night, following a specter. My sanity dropped a few notches, but my eyes felt extraordinarily focused as I believed Kevin is in danger. The lady acted as a GPS, pointing directions as I traversed road after road. I eventually reached a mansion where the specter disappeared, trees surrounding the area. I called the police before I broke into the house. Thoughts didn't have time to enter my mind as I willingly risked my life. The police might get here too late. I observed the place to see an open window nearby a tree. where a nearby tree stood in front. A branch reached out near enough to the window. Luckily, I had a lot of practice climbing trees in the backyard of the orphanage. I quickly found myself inside the mansion. The room was dark, and no soul was inside. Only moonlight served as illumination. I pressed my ears at the nearest exit, hinted with a peeking light, to hear people on the other side. "Is the ceremony ready to begin?" a man said. Yes. Can you fetch the boy? Our master is getting impatient. He wants to start the ceremony immediately," a familiar lady voice uttered. It was probably the maid from before. Several footsteps pounded on the floor. I opened the door slightly ajar to find out where the man was going. As he got further away and turned a corner, sneakingly, I followed him, making sure the maid won't notice me. My heart pounded hard as I followed the guy. My body heated with anticipation when he finally went inside a room. I heard Kevin's voice on the other side as I pressed my ears toward the door. The man grunted as Kevin resisted. I felt a punch on the right side of my abdomen, which made me spit. Kevin whimpered. As I heard his cries, an unnatural energy surged my body. I opened the door and swiftly punched the man unconscious. His body thudded hard on the floor. Kevin's eyes lit up with hope as he noticed it was me. Seeing he has a bruise on his face, I inspected his body, worried. He has several bruises, all throughout his body, the same spots I felt pain from before. I didn't have time to rationalize the situation. I quickly grabbed Kevin and dashed towards the room I jumped in. In our haste, I heard footsteps in the oncoming corner. My heart stopped a beat, but my mind dragged us to another room to hide. I pressed my back against the door, covering the mouth of Kevin. As we mustered all the strength we had, we have to keep quiet. Sweat dripped from my face. My heart palpitated as adrenaline and fear mixed in my blood. As the footsteps passed us, there was a moment of ease, but it didn't last long. Tension rose as someone discovered Kevin's appearance. A shout signaled several people to rush into the scene as we heard an army of footsteps madly pounding on the other side. "Find that little bastard," she hissed. Footsteps spread it out. I heard a barrage of doors being banged open, as if several guns fired in a war. Animosity clung to every footstep. The intention to find Kevin fueled their march. Grunts filled the halls, and as we heard that some neared our location, tactics flowed from my mind. We needed to find a way out. I locked the door and barricaded with a nearby bed. I looked at the window only to see other people patrolling the area. The few drops of sanity I had left dried as hopelessness poisoned my desire to live. This room will serve as our grave. We have no escape. I found myself frozen in the middle of the room, almost giving up. But my body jolted back its senses as I heard a pound on our door. I immediately dragged Kevin to a nearby closet and hid inside. They only needed several forceful pounds to open the barricaded door. "Come out, little boy. You think you're smart? That bed was a dead giveaway you're here. Just come out and I promise I won't hurt you. You might even get chocolates," a man teased. I felt both our hearts resonate at a fast beat. I heard footsteps slowly going our way. Kevin hugged me tight as I closed my eyes, accepting our fates. I thought it was the end until several thuds echoed throughout the dark room. The footsteps stopped. I took a peek to see all our pursuers unconscious. In the middle of the room, a white smoke dissipated. It was just a moment and I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw the face of my caretaker slowly fading into thin air, lit by moonlight. Everything was over when the sirens came. They found no one inside the mansion except for the unconscious individuals lying on our room's floor. They immediately gave Kevin first aid with his bruises. I got debriefed at their station. They said we were a victim of a cult. They have been tracking them for months, blaming them for several missing children cases. Some policemen even tried to go undercover, but never returned. They never knew what they wanted with the children, nor where their bodies are. This became the story of the month in which several news sites reported our story. I shielded Kevin from the press, and I refused all interviews. What really mattered was we both made it out alive. I adopted Kevin. I couldn't let him go, especially after that experience. I retired from daily orphanage work, since most of my time is making sure this little fella has my attention. He improved a lot since then. He even shared things from his past. He never knew his father, though. He only had his mother all of his life. She constantly told him to stay away from his father, for he is a bad man. He was not sure how he found himself in front of the orphanage. All he knows, he was inside a taxi with his mother before waking up drenched in rain. He kept a picture in his pocket and made sure he didn't lose it, and unexpectedly he shared it with me. It was a picture of him and his mother. I immediately recognized the face of the lady. It all made sense now. She was the one that guided me to Kevin. I cherished the memory. But something else was in the picture. A black figure with two horns hugged the lady and Kevin. I rubbed my eyes only to see it's now gone. Something tells me this isn't over.